She knew exactly what she was doing. She had heard the voice of God. She carried his words inside her for decades, and when the moment came, when her blind, dying husband reached out his trembling hands to bless the wrong son, she lied to his face, not out of weakness, not out of panic, out of absolute iron certainty that she knew something no one else in that room understood. Her name was Rebekah, and what she did on the day her husband Isaac lay dying has divided theologians for 3,000 years. Some call it betrayal, some call it manipulation, some call it the most scandalous act in the entire book of Genesis. But here is the question almost no one asks. What if it saved everything? What if the lie told at a dying man's bedside was the single act that kept the covenant of Abraham alive, the covenant that would eventually lead through thousands of years of history to the birth of a Savior? Leave us 777 inches the comments if you want to know the truth. And stay with us, because what you are about to hear will permanently change the way you read your Bible. Before we can understand the scandal, we have to go back to the very beginning of Rebekah's story. Not to the deathbed scene, not to the bowl of stew. We need to go back to the moment before Rebekah even existed in this narrative, because that is when she was already chosen. Abraham is old. His body is worn by time, but his mind is sharp, and his faith has never wavered. He knows death is coming, and before it arrives, he has one unfinished task, one thread he cannot leave dangling. His son Isaac must marry, but not just anyone, not a Canaanite woman, never a Canaanite woman. Why? Because Abraham understands something that many modern readers of the Bible overlook. Marriage is not merely the union of two people. It is the union of two worldviews, two sets of values, two gods. The Canaanite peoples worshipped idols. They practiced child sacrifice. They built their civilization on fear, on the appeasement of bloodthirsty deities. If Isaac takes such a wife, the seed of Abraham will be poisoned within a single generation. And so Abraham calls his most trusted servant and binds him with an oath, the most serious oath a man could take in that era. He says, "Place your hand under my thigh." This is not mere formality. It is an invocation of the highest powers, a call to accountability before the very source of life itself. The instruction is simple. Go to my homeland, to Mesopotamia, to my relatives. Find a wife for Isaac there. The servant takes 10 camels, rich gifts, and sets out on a journey of hundreds of miles, through desert and hills, along trade routes, past cities, and nomadic camps into the unknown, with nothing but a task: find the one. He has no name, he has no portrait, he has nothing except the instruction that she must come from Abraham's family, and she must be worthy. How do you find such a person? The old servant knows the answer. He prays. When he arrives at the city of Nahor and stops at the well in the evening, he addresses God with a prayer so bold it borders on testing the Almighty. He asks for a sign. The girl who offers water, not only to him, but also to his camels, she is the one. Understand what this means. To give a thirsty traveler a drink is an act of courtesy. To water 10 camels after a long journey is backbreaking physical labor. A camel can drink up to 25 gallons of water. 10 camels means 250 gallons. That is dozens of trips to the water with a heavy jar and back again. The servant is not asking for a pretty gesture. He is asking for a sign that reveals character through real, exhausting work. And then she appears, Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, granddaughter of Nahor, the brother of Abraham himself, beautiful in appearance, innocent, never having known a man. She comes down to the well with her jar on her shoulder, and the old servant watches her, barely breathing. He approaches and asks for water, and she does exactly what he prayed for. First, she gives him water. And then she says the words, "I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking." And she does not just say it, she runs back and forth to the water and back with full jars until all 10 camels have drunk their fill. A young girl who could have politely declined, who could have offered him a drink and gone about her day, stays and works simply because someone needs help. This is the first portrait of Rebekah. Remember it. It matters. The servant watches her in silence, waiting to see if she will follow through to the very end. And she does. Then he brings out gold jewelry, a ring for her nose, bracelets for her arms, and he asks, "Whose daughter are you? Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" When she gives her name, when he hears the name of Nahor, the brother of his master, the servant falls to his knees right there at the well. In the middle of the road, in full view of the city, he prays aloud, thanking God for leading him straight to the right house. Rebekah runs home. She tells her family everything, and the whole story begins to unfold with the speed of things driven by an invisible hand. But here is the detail that is easy to miss. When the negotiations are complete, when the gifts have been given, when Rebekah's brother Laban and her father Bethuel have given their consent, one final question arises. The servant wants to leave immediately. The next morning, the family asks to keep Rebekah for another 10 days, and then they do something almost unheard of in that era. They ask Rebekah herself, "Will you go with this man?" Think about this question. A young woman who has never met Isaac is being offered the chance, right now, to leave with a stranger to an unknown land forever. She will never see her family again, her home, her friends. She is going to a man she knows only as the son of a wealthy old patriarch, somewhere beyond the horizon. Her answer takes less than a second. "I will go." One word. No hesitation. No mourning for what is being left behind. This is Rebekah's second portrait. She knows how to make decisions, quickly, without fear, without looking back. Remember this too. It matters. Rebekah marries Isaac. They build a life together. Isaac loves her. This is written in the text plainly and simply, without decoration, in the way the Bible reserves for things that truly matter. And for a time they are happy. But there is one problem. Rebekah is barren. 20 years. 20 long years she cannot conceive. In a culture where barrenness was considered a kind of shame, where producing children was a sacred duty before God and ancestors, 20 years of barrenness means 20 years of quiet despair. Isaac prays. Not just prays, he pleads with God on behalf of his wife. The text uses a word that suggests persistence, repetition, relentlessness. This is not one short prayer. It is years of pleading, and God answers. Rebekah conceives, but the joy does not last long, because something strange begins to happen inside her womb. The children struggle against each other so violently that she cannot find peace. The pain and restlessness are so severe that she goes to inquire of God. Why is this happening to her? This is a bold act. In that era, speaking directly to God was something reserved for the chosen. Prophets, priests, patriarchs, not ordinary women. But Rebekah goes, and God answers her. This prophecy is recorded in Genesis 25 to 23, and it is so explosive, so shattering to every value system of that culture, that its consequences will echo for thousands of years of history. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Stop on those words. The older will serve the younger. In a world where the birthright is law, where the firstborn son receives a double portion of the inheritance, the father's blessing, and the position of head of the household, where the entire order of society is built on the principle that the firstborn has precedence over the second, God tells Rebekah that in her case, Everything will be reversed. The elder will serve the younger. Rebekah hears this prophecy. She carries it inside herself. She gives birth to twins, Esau and Jacob, and from the very first moment, she can see how unlike each other they are. Esau comes out red, covered all over with hair. Jacob comes out holding his heel. That too is a sign. In the language of that time, to grab at someone's heel means to try to take another's place. He will be named Jacob, the supplanter. The boys grow up. Esau becomes a hunter, a man of the fields, his father's favorite. Jacob becomes quiet, domestic, his mother's favorite. Isaac loves Esau because he enjoys the game he brings home. Rebekah loves Jacob, and here is where the story begins to move across very thin ice. Because Rebekah is not simply a mother who loves one son more than another. She is a woman who heard a prophecy. She knows what God said, Jacob, not Esau. She has carried this knowledge inside herself all these years, watching the boys grow, watching their characters form, watching the story develop, and she sees things Isaac does not see. She sees that Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew, sold it easily, without regret, almost laughing. What use is the birthright to me if I die of hunger? She sees a man for whom tradition, promise, and spiritual inheritance mean nothing. A man who lives entirely in the present moment, in today's hunger, today's desire. She sees that he has taken wives from among the Hittites' Canaanite women who make life bitter for both her and Isaac. The text says this plainly. They were a grief of mind to Isaac and to Rebekah, and she sees that her husband, blind now, frail, dying, notices none of this, or he notices and refuses to see, because he loves Esau with the kind of love that is blind to fault. And one day Rebekah understands, if she does not act now, the prophecy of God will be overridden by human weakness. Isaac calls for Esau. He is old, nearly blind, sensing that death is near. He wants to pass on to his firstborn the blessing, the one that carries within it the full spiritual force of the covenant of Abraham. This is not simply a dying father's kind wishes. This is a prophetic act. These are words that, in that culture, carried the weight of a legal document certified by heaven itself. Isaac says to Esau, "Go into the field, hunt me some game, prepare for me the kind of tasty food I love, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Rebekah hears this conversation. This is the moment, the exact one, the moment she has been waiting for, or dreading it, is hard to say which. The moment when everything she knows, everything she believes, everything she was told by God before these children were even born, all of it collides with the reality of one old man and his dying wish. And she makes her decision. She goes to Jacob, and she says what only a person who has long since settled everything within herself can say. "Listen, I heard your father say to Esau, 'Bring me game and prepare me food, that I may bless you before the Lord, before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Go to the flock and bring me 2 young goats, and I will prepare from them delicious food for your father, and you will bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." Jacob hesitates, not for moral reasons. Notice he does not say, "But mother, this is deception." He says, "My brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing." This is an important detail. Jacob is not afraid of the deception itself. He is afraid of the consequences. And Rebekah says the words that have entered history as one of the most mysterious statements in the entire Bible. "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice, and go, bring them to me." Stop, feel the weight of this. A mother tells her son, I will take all the responsibility, all the curse, let it fall on me. You just do what I tell you. These are not the words of someone acting out of selfishness or maternal blindness. These are the words of someone who has accepted a burden, who knows what she is doing, knows the cost of this decision, and moves forward anyway. Rebekah prepares the food. She takes Esau's best garments, the ones kept at home, and dresses Jacob in them. She covers his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the skin of the young goats, so that his skin feels like the skin of hairy Esau. She thinks through every detail, the smell of the clothes, the feel of the skin, the voice that she cannot change, and this nearly ruins everything, but Jacob mimics it well enough. Jacob enters his father's tent, and here is the scene that stops the breath. Isaac hears the voice and is puzzled. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are Esau's hands. He asks directly, "Are you really my son Esau?" Jacob lies. "I am." Isaac eats, drinks, kisses his son, smells the scent of his garments, and speaks the blessing. The words of this blessing are not simply kind wishes, they are prophecy wrapped in poetry. May peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. These are not words that can be taken back. In the understanding of that era, in the spiritual mechanics of the covenant, these words have already happened. They are already in motion. Jacob leaves. Literally minutes later, Esau returns from hunting with the prepared game, ready to receive his blessing, and the moment arrives that can be read as tragedy or as the resolution of a play that was written long ago. Isaac trembles with a very great trembling. Esau cries out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry. He pleads, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." But Isaac says what he must say. "I have blessed him, yes, and he shall be blessed." Can a prophetic blessing be taken back? No. Isaac understands this. Rebekah knew it. That is exactly why she acted as she did, and not otherwise. Here is where theologians have been divided for 3,000 years. One position is this: Rebekah lied. She deceived her dying husband. She used her own son as an instrument of manipulation. She violated the sacred right of passing the blessing. This is sin, perhaps sin in service of a good end, but sin nonetheless. Those who hold this view point to the consequences. Jacob is forced to flee his home. He will spend 20 years far from the mother he will never see again. Rebekah will die while he is still in exile. This in itself suggests that the method she chose was wrong, even if the goal was right. The second position: Rebekah did not lie to God. She was fulfilling his will. God had a prophecy. God had said, "The elder will serve the younger." Rebekah was the only person in this family who knew the prophecy and believed it enough to act on it. Did Isaac not know? Or did he not want to know? Here arises an interesting question that is rarely asked. Did Isaac know about the prophecy? Did Rebekah tell him what God said to her during the pregnancy? Everything suggests yes, he knew, or at the very least should have known, because Genesis does not tell us this was a secret. If so, then Isaac's own behavior becomes a puzzle. Why is he preparing to give the blessing to Esau, despite God's prophecy? Out of blind love for his elder son? Out of resistance to changing the established order? Out of that deep human stubbornness? We all carry the stubbornness that resists God when his will conflicts with our desires. There is a third position, the most provocative of all. What if God used the weaknesses of every person in this story? Rebekah's love for Jacob, Esau's greed, Isaac's attachment to his elder son, to bring the situation to exactly the outcome he intended. What if the entire scandal, the disguise, the lie, the deception at a dying man's bedside was part of the plan. This does not mean that the lie becomes good. It means that God is capable of writing straight on crooked lines. But if this is so, then Rebekah's role becomes something entirely different. She is not simply a mother blinded by love. She is a woman who heard the voice of God earlier than anyone else in this story, and who carried that voice inside herself for decades. And when the decisive moment came, she acted. To truly understand what happened at Isaac's deathbed, we need to see Rebekah whole from her first appearance at the well to the last lines the Bible devotes to her. She appears in Scripture as a woman of action. Remember the well? She did not simply promise to water the camels, she ran to do it. She did not simply agree to marry, she said, I will go without a single moment of hesitation. Throughout her story, Rebekah is the person who sees, decides, and acts quickly, decisively, without looking back. In this, there is both her strength and her weakness. Her strength, she is capable of action when others waver. This may be exactly why God chose her as the one through whom His will would be accomplished. Her weakness, she does not always wait for God to arrange things Himself. Sometimes, she takes matters into her own hands where it might have been better to wait. But here is the honest question worth asking yourself. If Rebekah had not acted that day at Isaac's deathbed, would God's prophecy have been fulfilled? Or would the entire line of the covenant, the whole path from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to the 12 tribes of Israel to David to Solomon to thousands of years of history that leads finally to the birth of a Savior, would all of that have broken apart on the day a blind old man stretched out his hands toward the wrong son? This is too large a question to answer simply, but it is worth carrying. There is one more dimension of Rebekah that often stays in the shadows. She is intelligent, genuinely, deeply intelligent, with the kind of intelligence that joins sharp observation, strategic thinking, and profound understanding of people. She sees both her sons completely. She sees Esau, his impulsiveness, his inability to think about the future, his contempt for the spiritual inheritance of the family, and she sees Jacob, his character, his potential, his fitness for the role God appointed him. She sees her husband, his attachment to Esau, his unwillingness to face the truth, and she understands that waiting is not an option. Are those who criticize her for this right? Partly, yes. The method was questionable. It caused pain to Esau, who wept at his father's feet. It caused pain to Rebekah herself. She lost the son who was forced to flee. They would never see each other again. But here is the paradox the Bible confronts us with again and again. God uses imperfect people to accomplish His perfect plan. He does not wait until we are flawless. He works with what is there. Abraham twice presented his wife as his sister, protecting himself at the cost of her honor, and both times God protected her. Jacob, having received the blessing through deception, will himself be deceived by Laban again and again, and will pass through fire before he becomes Israel. David will be a murderer and an adulterer, and will remain a man after God's own heart. Rebekah belongs in this company. To understand the full scale of what Rebekah did, we need to understand what exactly was held within the blessing she secured for Jacob. This was not simply a father's farewell words. This was the transfer of the covenant, the very covenant God made with Abraham so many years before. I will make of you a great nation, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Isaac's blessing is not a magic incantation. It is a prophetic confirmation of the son's entrance into the covenant line. It says, you are the one who will continue the path begun by Abraham. Through you will come what God promised. If this blessing had gone to Esau, the man who sold his birthright for stew, who took wives from pagan nations and made his parents' lives bitter, what would have happened? Theologians debate this. Could God have corrected the situation another way? Probably yes. He is God. There is always another way, but he chose this one. And in this chosen path, Rebekah is the central figure. Not Abraham, who died before, not Isaac, sitting in the darkness of his blindness, not Jacob, who fears and hesitates. Rebekah, the 12 sons of Jacob, will become the 12 tribes of Israel. From these 12 tribes will come judges, kings, prophets. From the tribe of Judah, David. From the line of David, the one for whom this entire story existed. A chain stretching across thousands of years, and in one of its links, an aging woman who is cooking goat meat, wrapping her son's hands in animal skin, and saying, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice." The story does not end with the blessing. Rebekah knows that Esau is furious. She hears him say to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." She acts again, quickly and decisively. She tells Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Mesopotamia. She explains it to Isaac as a desire to find Jacob a wife from her own people, not from the Canaanite women. Isaac agrees, and here is a remarkable detail: he blesses Jacob again, this time consciously, openly, knowing who stands before him. He says, "God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you." What does this mean? It means that Isaac accepted what had happened, that perhaps, in the depths of his blind soul, he already knew or now accepted that this was right. Jacob leaves, and Rebekah never sees him again. She will die while he is with Laban. She will not see him marry. She will not see her grandchildren. She will not see him return, reconcile with Esau, or become Israel. She will not see any of it. But she made it all possible. This too is the price of faith. Sometimes you plant a tree whose shade you will never sit under. The Bible does not tell us how Rebekah died. This itself is strange. The text mentions her death in a single, almost offhand phrase, as though it is turning the page quickly, not wanting to linger on the pain. She was buried in the cave of Machpelah, the same place as Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac, in the place that would become sacred to all the people of Israel, beside those who carried the covenant. We began with a question: was Rebekah a traitor or an instrument of God? By the end of this story, I want to offer you a third possibility. She was a human being with everything that word carries, with imperfect methods and correct knowledge, with love that blinded and faith that saw what others could not see, with the willingness to act, and with the price that had to be paid for those actions. The Bible does not canonize Rebekah. It does not turn her into a flawless saint. It shows us a living person in a living situation with living stakes. And in this lies her value to us, not as a model for blind imitation, but as a mirror in which each of us can see ourselves in those moments when we too carry a prophecy, know the truth, see the fork in the road, and stand before a choice: act or wait, take responsibility or step back, risk everything for something greater, or preserve the peace at the cost of betraying what is true. Rebekah chose action. She took responsibility. She risked. And the scandal she created at Isaac's deathbed turned out to be the single link in the chain that held the entire covenant together. Rebekah's voice sounds in the Bible only a few times, but every time, at a decisive moment: "I will go at the well." When everything was beginning, "Let your curse be on me." At the bedside of her dying husband, when everything was being decided: "Arise, flee." At the end, when someone had to be saved. 3 moments, and between them, the whole life of a person who heard God earlier than anyone, carried that hearing longer than anyone, and paid for it more dearly than anyone. This is not a story about betrayal. This is a story about faith that looks like betrayal, only to those who did not hear what she heard. Rebekah was not an angel. She was a woman who, in the darkest moment, made a choice, and that was enough. Tell me in the comments what you think. Was Rebekah right? Could God have fulfilled his prophecy without her intervention? This question has no easy answer, and that is exactly why it is worth the conversation. If this story moved, you hit the like button and subscribe. We explore the Bible where it is hardest, most uncomfortable, most honest, because that is exactly where its real depth lies. Until next time, there is something else worth sitting with before we close. We tend to read the patriarchal narratives as stories about men: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, the names that echo through sermons and stained glass and centuries of commentary. But when you slow down and read carefully, really carefully, you begin to notice something. Again and again, it is the women who move the story forward. Sarah, who laughed at God's promise and then received it anyway. Hagar, cast out into the desert with her son, who was met by an angel and given a nation. Tamar, who disguised herself as a prostitute to force her father-in-law Judah into keeping his covenant promise, and who ended up in the genealogy of Jesus. Ruth, a Moabite widow who chose faithfulness to a foreign god and a foreign people, and became the great-grandmother of David. Rahab the harlot, who hid the spies and saved her family, and who is also in that same genealogy. Rebekah belongs in this company too. All of these women acted in moments when the men around them were failing, hesitating, or simply absent. All of them used whatever means they had available. None of them operated from positions of power or authority or social standing, and all of them ended up at the pivot points of the most important story the Bible tells. Is this an accident? Or is there something the text is quietly, consistently saying about who God chooses to work through? The patriarchal culture of the ancient world believed that inheritance, covenant, and spiritual leadership traveled through the male line. And on the surface level, the Bible reflects this. The genealogies track fathers and sons. The blessings go from man to man. The names of women are often not even recorded. But underneath this surface, something else is happening. God keeps choosing women as the agents of his most critical interventions. He keeps speaking to them, working through them, using them at the exact moments when the story could collapse without them. Rebekah is perhaps the clearest example of this pattern. She is the only person in her story who receives a direct word from God about the future. Not Abraham, he was already dead. Not Isaac, he never sought that word. Not Esau or Jacob. Rebekah, God told her the truth about what was happening in her womb. God told her what the future held. God trusted her with the knowledge that would determine everything, and she carried that knowledge in silence for years, decades. She watched her sons grow into themselves, watched her husband's preference for Esau deepen, watched the spiritual inheritance of Abraham begin to tilt toward the wrong son, and she said nothing, not yet, because she was waiting for the right moment. This requires a particular kind of strength that is rarely recognized: the strength of knowing and waiting, the strength of holding a truth inside yourself when everything around you seems to be moving in the wrong direction, and not panicking and not forcing a resolution before the time is right. Rebekah waited. She raised Jacob. She prepared him. She watched. And when the moment came, that single, unrepeatable window, when the blessing was about to be given and could not be recalled, she moved, fast, without hesitation, with the same decisiveness she showed at the well all those years before, when a stranger asked her for water, and she ran to fill jar after jar after jar. The woman at the well and the woman at the deathbed are the same woman. Rebekah does not change. The situation changes. The stakes change. But she is exactly who she always was. Someone who sees what needs to be done and does it fully, immediately, without calculating the personal cost until after it is already paid. This consistency of character across an entire lifetime is one of the things that makes her story so compelling and so honest. The Bible is not showing us a saint who became strong in a crisis moment. It is showing us a person whose character was formed long before the crisis formed, at a well, on a long journey, in the quiet years of a marriage and a household, and who simply remained herself when everything was on the line. That is the deepest thing the story of Rebekah teaches us. Not that deception is acceptable when the cause is right, not that mothers always know best, not that God's ends justify any means, but this, that the character we build in the ordinary days is the character we will have in the extraordinary ones, that the faith we exercise in small things, a jar of water, a one-word answer to a life-changing question, is the same faith that will carry us through the moments when everything depends on it. Rebekah was faithful at the well long before anyone was watching, long before the stakes were high, long before she knew what was coming. And because she was faithful there, she was ready here. This is the scandalous choice that saved God's chosen people. Not only the moment of deception at the deathbed, but the lifetime of formation that made the woman capable of that moment. The scandal is not the lie. The scandal is the faith. Faith that looked like manipulation. Faith that cost her the last years with her son. Faith that no one around her fully understood. Not Isaac, not Esau, not perhaps even Jacob himself in that moment, but faith that held. And because it held, everything else could continue. The covenant, the promise, the long unbroken line that stretches from that smoky tent in Canaan all the way to a stable in Bethlehem. Rebekah made that line possible. Her name means captivating or binding. Some scholars translate it as a noose, the kind used to tether animals, suggesting a connection so strong it cannot be broken. Perhaps that is the most fitting meaning of all. Rebekah was the one who held the covenant in place when it was about to slip away. She was the binding. And without her, the story as we know it, the whole story, from Genesis to Revelation, from creation to redemption, might have looked entirely different. That is not a small thing to carry. That is everything